Today, Dr. Carla Works is going to join me. She's a New Testament professor, and I think her insights are really going to help your discussion. Hey, Carla.
Hey, Tom.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah. Carla, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you teach, where you teach, and what your interests are in that.
Okay, well, I teach New Testament at Wesley Theological Seminary, where I have been teaching for a decade. I can't believe it.
It's been that long.
But I want to train leaders for the church, not interested in studying the Bible and dissecting it for the sake of dissecting it. It's not Shakespeare.
Right.
It's a living word. And it challenges us and engages us, transforms us. And I want to be part of that.
So, Carla, in 1 Peter, it says that we should love each other constantly because love covers a multitude of sins. And I'm just thinking about how we have to do that everywhere we go. And I'm really interested as a New Testament professor. Tell me your interpretation of that.
Well, love is really the only thing strong enough to conquer sin. It is God's love that sends Christ to die on a cross for our sins. So love is at the very core of this good news. Love is the reason God refuses to abandon God's creation to the power of sin. So love really is the power that conquers all evil.
So as we're driving along, in front of us there's this giant cross, which is
going toward the
when
cross.
we're going right toward the cross. It feels like we're going to drive right up to the foot of the cross, and so it's just really interesting thinking about you talked earlier about how love has a particular shape, right?
Yes.
And this is it.
It is cruciform. And, the first believers didn't need to be reminded of that the way we do, I think. It's hard for us to even fathom how scandalous the cross would be for that first century world.
As it relates to love, how does the cross inform that?
You started your chapter talking about the Sermon on the Plain.
Right.
Being an orientation session for the disciples, that they need to become the most loving people on the planet. The cross teaches us what love looks like. It looks like loving your neighbor as yourself, even sacrificially, humbly, loving your neighbor as yourself, and being willing to give all that you have and are for that love.
Yeah, it really calls us to that, right? Like, it's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to try to be a nice person today. Yeah. That's very different from...
What does that even mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's very different from saying, I'm really going to try to love everybody.
Tom, in chapter 3, you mention, as an example, a cab driver named Davis. You could just take a cab ride with your taxi driver, and it's just a normal exchange, a service that's provided. But you could also create a conversation and learn about Davis. And at the end of that little section, you talk about how you're sad, you feel, or you're feeling something.
Right.
When the taxi goes away,
right.
There's somebody in there that you now know. Suddenly, you have feelings for Davis that did not exist before that encounter.
There's a real sense of friendship that can pop up.
So if we were going to write that story in Greek, the language of the New Testament, we would use the term agape to describe what you were feeling about Davis. And agape, we translate as love.
Right.
But the interesting part of the New Testament, and I think this would have been scandalous in the first century world, is that agape is the kind of love that you would experience, you would feel for a beggar on the street.
So it's a compassion.
It's compassion, it's sympathy, even empathy.
Right. Does it get to the place of willingness to make a sacrifice? Or is it the precursor to that?
That's what is so crazy about the New Testament using agape. The whole of the gospel rests on this crazy sense of God looking at us, looking at creation, and feeling for us what you felt for Davis, and being willing to sacrifice God's own son for that.
It really is interesting to me how quickly you can connect. And that's actually part of the reason I wanted to do this in a car.
Yes.
Is that I think the disciples were on a journey with each other. And I think the more they were journeying together, walking together, talking together, in our life that would be in a car, but in their life it would be on foot.
Right.
I think the more they did it, the more they grew to care about each other.
Right.
And it's just, to me, I'm amazed at the human capacity.
Yes.
I don't think that's my capacity. I think it's what Christ can do with us. But your point is, that's what the New Testament's talking about when it says love.
This New Testament love absolutely makes no sense. Why would you be willing to sacrifice your own son for a beggar or for an enemy? For that feeling that you had for your driver, that feeling that you had that seemed so small was yet powerful enough that you'd be willing to offer hospitality to really someone who is still a stranger. But it is something indescribable. I'm convinced that this is actually why I still go to church.
Really?
Yes. Because there were those moments where something so big happened.
Yeah.
But it's indescribable. You experience God in those moments. It's something about, it changes how you perceive your world.
To use your phrasing, you still, quote unquote, you still go to church.
I still go to church.
Which is to say, church can be disappointing, right?
Church can be very
I
disappointing.
mean, really can. I'm a pastor. I'll take that. I mean, hey, let me tell you something. Lay people, they can be really disappointing too. So it's a two-way deal. But your point is, you still go to church because something in Christian community, love still finds a way to prevail.
Yes. And there's something overwhelming that occurs in community when the love of God transforms a motley crew of people
Yeah.
into a family. To be part of a community where truly everyone is welcome and everyone can use the unique gifts and talents that God has given them to edify the community. Yeah,
That's a big
love.
deal, isn't it?
Yeah, that's love.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. When you see somebody else as someone that Christ died for,
Yeah.
you know,
yeah.
it
There's the
really
cross
does
again.
change. Yes, it changes your perception of that person. Maybe you do not love them yet, but you now see them as someone Christ has loved to the point of giving Christ's life for that person. And once you see that, you can't unsee it.